What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where me and my good friend Danny Torkel, Dr. Zayas God on Blue Sky and other places, we talk about horror movies and streaming shows. So we've been covering Horror's Greatest, a streaming show on Shudder for multiple episodes now. We didn't cover episode 3 last week, so we're doing a double header. We're covering 3 and 4. And the Hidden Gems one, Danny, that one, it was filled with, as you could probably guess, not a lot of movies I've seen. And then the horror scores one, the killer scores one, that was a really fucking good episode. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like both of these ideas. I love any any show that like you can walk away from, any like documentary series in the horror genre where you can walk away and go, "Oh shit, here's a new list of movies that I need to watch." And for me, who has seen a lot, I walked away from the Hidden Gems episode with a list of movies.
Yeah.
Dead of Night, Planet of the Vampires, War of the Gargantuas, which I actually watched the first half hour of because it's streaming on Max.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. What was the other one? Ghost Watch, which I've never seen and I've heard great things about. Um, I actually looked. I think the Stone Tape or the Stone Tapes, that like movie about them digging, like the house is haunted and it's like killing the investigators. That movie I think is also streaming, maybe on Tubi. But yeah, I love an episode like that. It made me think of uh the third uh In Search of Darkness, where David Weiner really got like into deep cuts from the 80s that people may have missed. Like, it's easy to do In Search of Darkness 1. You cover the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, you cover the Halloween sequels. Makes all the sense in the world. Part 2, he got very, I think, foreign. He did a lot of foreign horror. And then part 3 with the deep cuts, and like you're like, wow, I've never seen any of these movies. And I felt a lot like I was watching something like that. I love that there's movies that I genuinely love that show up here, like Rare
Yes.
Exports.
Yeah, right,
Rare
right.
Exports is a movie that I shout to the heavens to anyone who will listen. Charlotte's actually seen it. One of my favorite Christmas horror movies. Um, House of the Devil was on here.
Right.
Freaked, which for years was like a lost gem because it was like not available before streaming. Like it wasn't on a DVD. You had to like find Freaked. I think I got a bootleg copy at a horror convention like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was that was fun. That was a good episode. I enjoyed that. They also, I don't know if did you ever see The Black Coat's Daughter?
Okay. No. And it's funny because this is the first episode that I have not seen the entire episode of. Because for some weird reason, they say spoiler alert in this amount of time. And so I fast forwarded because I've never seen it. Now I'm starting to turn into a big Osgood Perkins fan because I really liked Long Legs. I really want to see, what is it called? Monkey
The
Shines? Like what?
Monkey. The
Monkey.
Monkey.
The Monkey. I really want to see that. So I didn't want to spoil Black Coat's Daughter. But before we talk
No,
about Black Coat's Daughter, though, can we pump the brakes for a second? You're saying you didn't see Ghost Watch?
yeah. It went up on Shudder a while ago, and it's just been one of those movies that I've kind of skipped over.
Yeah.
And like this was kind of the impetus I needed to
Yeah.
finally commit to it.
I'm in a little group. You actually came to one meeting for it. Where it's just me and a couple.
Uh, Pete's. Am I frozen? Is Pete frozen? Who knows?
Oh, we're still live. Did you
Did
tell?
you freeze?
Oh, totally. 100%. What about you?
Oh, okay. No, I just assumed I froze and I jumped out and jumped back in.
You know,
Yes,
it's
you were
it's funny
saying about
because
the.
yeah. Okay, but one other thing that our show, we're having so many technical difficulties recording on Saturday or Sunday. It reminds me of this one disc jockey that lived in Austin for like his entire life and had like a 50-year career on the radio here. Like he would just have long pauses of silence on the radio program, and I feel like that's what our podcast is and our YouTube. It's just moments where we freeze. And anyway, I'm sorry. I'm talking a lot. What I was gonna say was that Ghost Watch, I ended up watching not because of our channel, but just because my friend suggested it. It was one of the best fucking horror things I've ever seen.
That's what I've heard from everybody. I know Chris. I'm pretty sure Chris recommended it. It's just one of those blind spots that I have to correct. But yeah, I liked that. These are the kind of episodes I really enjoy. But I will say that like Charlotte, who loves this show, wasn't into this episode because I think she likes to see the movies that she's seen.
Right.
So she enjoyed the horror scores episode because most of the scores are from like pretty epic movies that she's seen.
Right.
Um, so I think this is like I said, this is like In Search of Darkness 3. Uh, In Search of Darkness 1 and probably In Search of Darkness 1 is great for a somebody who enjoys the horror genre but is not doesn't have a podcast about it, doesn't go to
Right.
horror trivia about it,
Right.
right?
Right.
They're
Right.
gonna be like, oh yeah, Freddy Krueger, oh cool, yeah, oh the Halloween sequels, I used to rent those, okay. um In Search of Darkness 2 and 3 are more for hardcore horror fans that here's a list of movies that maybe you've seen, but
Yeah.
more likely you haven't. And now you have a list of like 50 movies to go watch. And I kind of felt like that about this Hidden Gems episode. I really appreciated that aspect of it. Um, and, I just enjoy these episodes. I actually watched uh, this episode, I actually watched the scores episode
Hmm.
right before going to final exam horror trivia, where
Nice.
half of the talking heads, not half, but three of the talking heads from this series are there. Two of them are the hosts, Ted Gagan and Michael Gingold. Jen Wexler, who uh, directed the Sacrifice Game and the Ranger. She's been a constant presence so it was just really great that like I watched this show and then I turned to Charlotte and I'm like, all right, well, I gotta go hang out with those people at horror trivia.
That's
And
excellent.
yeah.
So, like, do you ever talk to them about this show? Do you ever go up and be like, "I just saw you on this episode"? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like we've talked about like the show. Like it's like a fun thing to like it's one of those things that like just gets you talking at the bar when you're waiting for trivia between rounds. You like it's a conversation starter. And because like I think they just like approach them for different episodes, or maybe they'll have them sit down and then record like all their talking head pieces for multiple episodes.
right,
uh,
right.
but yeah, this show comes up all the time in conversation. It's just it's cool. It's awesome to get to go and like actually know these people.
Yeah. Ted Gagan. That's how you say his last name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he makes this really fun point for his episode. He talks about how like the Jaws score, no, I'm sorry, not the Jaws score, the Omen score is like as strong for him or important to him as the Omen score, you know?
I put the for me like I when you go into an episode on horror scores, to me there's like the Mount Rushmore of horror scores, and it's Bernard Herrmann in Psycho, it's John Williams Jaws, it's John Carpenter's Halloween, and it's Jerry Goldsmith's The Omen, and I'm so happy that they included that. I'm happy they showed like him winning the Oscar, and I had never seen that video before. Excuse me. I had never seen that video before from the 19 it's the Oscars for movies in 1976, so it's probably the 1977 award show
Sure.
where they do Ave Satini with a like interpretive dance on
Yeah.
stage, and I'm like, that is terrifying,
Hmm.
and I love it so much, and it fucking won the Oscar for best song.
Yeah.
Like in an age where like they hire like the highest level celebrities to write Oscar winning songs. Like Billie Eilish won for her Barbie song last year. Great
Right.
song. But like could you imagine like a piece of like gothic music being written for a satanic movie about the Antichrist winning best original song? Yeah, I thought the horror scores episode was great. I love the points that everybody was making. I like that they took it back to like King Kong and Phantom of the Opera and the original where music played such a bigger part, especially in the silent era and the early days of like talkies where the music was so important. And then like you
Yeah.
get to hear the famous stories of like screening Jaws without the John Williams score.
Right.
And what a silly movie that must have been.
Yes. Well, no, but here's the thing. Okay, first off, we're kind of jumping ahead, right? Because we got secret gems to talk about too. I like your mug there. But what I was gonna say was I could talk way more about this scores one than I could talk about the secret gems one because I've actually seen the majority of these movies.
We could
Uh,
flip back and forth. It's fine.
yeah, let's flip back. Let's flip back. But what I was gonna say was the fucking Exorcist is not in this lineup. It's
Uh,
on your shirt.
I I think that again, I think it's they're prisoners of the amount of time they have. These episodes are about 45 minutes each.
Yeah,
They try to kind of run a gamut of horror history
yeah,
while hitting the big movies. Like I was legitimately concerned that Jaws would not be in the scores episode only because of the obvious, well, it's not a horror movie.
right, right,
Uh
right.
Also, there's a lot of people I thought maybe there would be like there's always potentially issues with getting clips to show. Maybe like you need the rights for certain movies that you don't have. Like
Yeah,
a Steven Spielberg movie being on Shudder's Horror's Greatest is crazy. Like it's awesome. Like and so I was kind of interested to see, are they going to hit the big hitters? Like are they
yeah,
going to? And I was glad that they did. I listen. My minority opinion that The Omen is, I hold The Omen in higher esteem than The Exorcist. So I love that they gave Jerry Goldsmith his props, and they focused on The Omen so much. Uh, yeah, and obviously, Tubular Bells and The Exorcist theme is iconic. It's one of the greatest themes. I love that they included the Rosemary's Baby score because that is so unnerving,
yes,
and they also go into Goblin and
yep.
the Dario
Suspiria.
Argento
Yeah,
score, especially Suspiria's more than any, or
right.
Suspiria and Deep Red, which they go into, which has like the na na the
Yep,
kids singing in the
yep,
background.
yep, yep.
Yeah, you can't do a horror scores episode without talking about Argento movies and Goblin. You can do a whole episode on that.
Right.
Uh,
What's so interesting about this whole thing, though, right, is that they kind of changed the format of the show for this episode. First off, they bring in a lot more talking heads that are in sound design versus the other
that was
filmmakers.
awesome.
Right, right. And then the other thing that was awesome was that they focused on individual composers and then they would just list out the movies that they made scores for. I really like that touch. Not to mention that they like talk about actual like music, like making the music. and then they weave in sound design, which I love the fact that they talk about the idea of like melding sound design with scores. Because there are quite a few movies, especially horror movies, where I'll be like listening to something and I'll be like, okay, so is that supposed to be a sound effect that's in the movie or is that part of the score? You know? And
Yeah. And they
you
were defining the terms also. That like
right.
when they had the musicians bring up like specific musical terms that laymen like me who I could only I couldn't carry a tune if I was taking it to the airport with me.
There you go.
Uh yeah, so to define those terms, I thought that was a nice touch also.
Absolutely. I you know, I was gonna say that when it comes to these scores and then they go through the composers, I was actually like really surprised at how many like horror scores each of them did. Like it just like, oh, they did this movie and this movie and this movie. Now, going back to I wanted to talk about two things that you said. First off, the Steven Spielberg one, you were like, it was kind of surprising to see a Spielberg movie on this show. I was gonna say that Steven Spielberg as a filmmaker, his movies can often scare me a lot more than just straight up horror movies. Like Jurassic Park, I know I've said this on the show before, but like I'm still kind of traumatized from Jurassic Park and I'm 42, you know?
All three Indiana Jones movies. In Raiders, the first time I saw the ending of Raiders and everybody melt, that scared the shit out of me.
Right.
The first time I saw Alfred Molina's body like popping out after he gets killed at the beginning,
Yeah.
scared me a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, Temple of Doom just was like a literal nightmare from beginning to end.
Right.
And then Last Crusade, when the villain drinks from the wrong cup and that
Yeah.
scene scared, and that like comes out of nowhere at the end. You're like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the Indiana Jones movie scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't want to get into the who directed Poltergeist, but like he executive produced Poltergeist. His name is on the box. That movie is one of my all-time favorite movies in terms
Yeah.
of like scariest experiences. I mean,
Like
and fucking Jaws. Jaws is this for me the greatest horror movie ever made. It does. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he has so many movies that could fit onto this list because like there's even scary parts in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's scary parts in E.T. for fuck's sake when like the government shows up. If you're a little kid watching that, that's scary.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but I was gonna say though that he's actually the perfect filmmaker to bring up for this episode because he is a master of having that music kind of play in the background to build up the tension or to make something seem over the top and amazing, but then also taking the music away and just using the sound effects to scare you. And like one example I can think of for him is War of the Worlds. Like I know a lot of people don't like his Tom Cruise War of the Worlds movie or they don't think it's that great, but I think that like once you get up to the first alien attack, that whole amount of time up to that first alien attack and maybe even longer, but like that just up to that sequence is very scary and suspenseful. And that's a great example of when the Martian ships come out of the ground, they have this sort of like horn noise that they make. Often they go
Yeah.
like, and it's weird because it's like this sort of blending of soundtrack and sound design. Because like you'll hear that noise and you're like, oh, is that like John Williams music or is that the fucking Martian ship?
That's how I feel watching Halloween, where like the like the creepiest noises in Halloween are there's one moment where like he stands up behind the car as like she's Annie's walking the girl across the street, Lindsay across the street, and as they walk past the car, Michael stands up and the music just goes like and you're like, what the fuck was that? Like, was that like did somebody it's all probably generated on like freaking Carpenter synthesizer or something,
Right.
but it sounds like somebody like just ran a bow across like a violin at like the worst angle, and it gives you goosebumps. And there's all of those moments throughout Halloween where it doesn't even sound like music. It's not
Right.
the Halloween theme. It's just
Right.
like the
Right, right,
and,
right,
like
right.
in the background, and you're like, "Fuck! Like, what is going on?"
Right,
And it's
right.
and it and I think one of the points they make in the scores episode is that almost unlike any other genre, the only other genre I could think of would maybe be like an old fashioned adventure film, um, like an Indiana Jones or Star Wars. Right?
Right,
I know
right,
Star
right.
Wars sci-fi, but like an adventure movie
Yeah.
where the score, the music becomes an actual character. Somebody says that about Jaws, where the
Oh, yeah.
music is an actual character in the movie.
Yes.
And horror is the genre that they credit with having music actually create the suspense,
Mm-hmm.
where it becomes a tool of the filmmaker, where usually you'd say like, oh, the script has to create the suspense, the acting has to create the suspense, maybe the editing or the cinematography. No, it's in horror it is the music, and if the music cues and the sound effects and the sound design hit the right way, it just does something to you, and you get those chills instantly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this show really is a treasure trove for guys like us because I think it just kind of adds to points that we can make when we discuss horror films, right? Like, oh, we can kind of quote this person or we can kind of reference this thing. There's so many good things that they say in this episode. They talk about this one filmmaker who says that like a score is like the glove where you can like kind of touch an audience member, but they don't necessarily know that you're doing it. I mean, that sounds a little pervy saying it
I
like
was gonna
that.
say, wait a minute.
Yeah. But besides that, to talk about, I mean, David Desmalkian, he's just always a contributor to this show and always has these great points. And towards the end of the episode, he talks about how his teacher told him to put his hands over his ears when he was watching a horror movie. I mean, 1000%, the sound is the strongest part of a horror movie because that's what builds up your anticipation. That's what the jump scares come with, that sound, and they
Yeah,
even
that's
in this.
what
Go ahead.
that's what Charlotte does. When Charlotte gets really scared, she she'll leave her eyes open, but she'll like go like this, cover her ears. I sat with her during Smile 2 in the movie theater, and she had her hands like this most of the movie, like ready to like clamp down the second anything remotely scary happened.
Yeah.
And that's how, like, if we're watching a movie on the couch, if we're laying in bed watching a movie, she's always ready to go, because it's the in hard it's like when you're like running outside, or if you're taking a walk, like you get cold from your ears. If your ears are cold, your whole body's cold, so it's like, you wear a hat, you feel better.
Right, right. Tune out that sound, man. Like it's funny because I mean I have a personal example. I saw Nosferatu twice in the past couple of weeks. The first time I saw it, I think the sound system wasn't like as strong as the second time. Second time I saw it, I was like, oh shit, this Nosferatu guy's really scary. And it's just because like the sound system was much more powerful. You could feel it, it was coming from everywhere. Um, it's funny, we're talking so much about the scores, but I think it's something that you and I are both kind of passionate about too, And just to kind of bring it back to your namesake, Dr. Zayas God, I was so fucking
Yes.
happy when they showed Planet of the Apes. Because I was like, they're probably not going to show Planet of the Apes, even though we've talked about it on this channel and we've talked about it as how it has horror elements. But like, I was like, that score is so fucking unique and interesting.
I love the Planet of the Apes scene.
Hmm.
I'm just noticing, by the way, that when I logged out and logged back in, I must have pressed the screen by accident because I added an M. Now it says Dr. Zayas GODM. So
Oh,
whatever. That's
okay.
not my but it's fine. Um, the Planet of the Apes score, when they go into that and they're like breaking it down scene by scene, and how they used all this different sound, and like to like create, where it's like for like one little bit it'll be like the beating of sticks against a tree, and then
Right.
like and it's so crazy how they do that. Like,
Yeah.
these are skill sets far and beyond anything I can imagine, and I'm just really always impressed by the creativity to not only do it, but to then watch it and have it be so fucking good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, you know, with the scores and just the fact that like we're talking about Planet of the Apes, we talk about The Shining at one, we talk about what do you call it? Alien of all things, Alien. Like it's so interesting to me the behind the scenes stuff because they were saying that like Alien had kind of a much more adventurous score, and there's adventurous moments in Alien where the music kind of swells up, but they were saying that Ridley Scott wanted to have a much more like subtle, creepy sound to it, and I think that's so important with Alien.
I just imagine Ridley Scott like listening to the original score of Alien and being like, "It sucks. Do it again."
Right, right. That is the way that he would act of all people. Yeah, yeah. It's so funny how all these scores, the majority of them are like connected to legendary filmmakers, right?
Yeah.
Like they talk about other movies, they take like a minute to talk about like movies that like aren't as well known. Like they talk about what is it, like Out of Her Skin or something, or In Her Skin? What the fuck's that movie?
Under the Skin.
Under the Skin. Okay, okay. So they talk about that. And they talk about it real briefly. It's like a, kind of like sneeze and you'll miss it moment. But the majority of the filmmakers they talk about, they're these like big, huge name filmmakers. Ridley, Steven Spielberg. I mean, who else do they cover on there?
Hitchcock.
Hitchcock.
Carpenter. Yeah.
Carpenter, right, right, and it's like they're paired up. With the exception of Carpenter, he is the fucking composer. But these
Well,
other guys, go ahead.
don't they have Alan Howarth is one of the talking heads, and him and Carpenter work together on most of their 80s scores. I think late 70s and 80s scores, and they talk about like how he used the synthesizer and did a lot of the. But I mean, like you talk about Carpenter, and as much as we and other people may argue about the new Halloween trilogy, the best part of the new Halloween trilogy by a mile is the score that Carpenter, his son, Cody, and I know the other guy's name is Daniel something. I forgot his name, but the three of them, the scene in the 2018 Halloween where Allison discovers the chubby guy dead on the fence pole and then turns around and sees Michael for the first time, and the score comes in and it's the Halloween theme, but it's different and it's
Yep,
more synthed up and heavier, and you're like, wow.
yep.
And the score in a horror movie can make you overlook anything if like you it because it becomes a character, and it's like that supporting character that you love in a movie where if it's there, if the character's on screen or if they're there in the background, they always make the movie better.
1000%. And some of these scores are so iconic and so memorable that like you just have to hear a couple of notes and you're like, oh, it's that movie. Like I think one of the best example is in Scream. They're watching Halloween, right? And it's on the TV, and you often don't see the TV in Scream while they're watching it, but you hear the music cues, you hear the sound design, and you're like, oh, they're watching Halloween, you know. Like if you just
Yeah.
heard Jamie Lee Curtis sort of like moaning like you'd be like, okay, which horror movie is that? But then you hear like the bing, you're like, oh, okay, it's Halloween.
Yeah, I'm glad they mention. I think they do Nightmare on Elm Street
Right,
towards the end of the episode.
right.
That Charles Bernstein, I
That sounds
think
right.
his score in Nightmare on Elm Street is kind of the forgotten great horror score. Uh, because I think it's just it comes after Carpenter's Halloween. Harry Manfredini in Friday the 13th, of course, is you could just go and everybody knows what you're talking about. But the score in Nightmare on Elm Street is so creepy. I love it. And you know what? It kind of makes me think one of the reasons that I think I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre so much is I always come back to the idea that when I'm watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it feels like I'm watching something. I feel like I'm watching something I shouldn't be watching. I feel like I'm watching almost a snuff movie because there's really no score in the movie at all. And I
Right.
think that the absence of the score in Texas Chainsaw Massacre elevates the realism of what you're watching. Whereas
1000%.
whereas like Halloween, the score is so great, and it like tells you that the killer is near, and so it you're scared, but you're also kind of comforted in a weird way that you're
Yeah.
watching a movie.
Right,
Uh,
right. That's a really great point. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, there's even more greats that I'd even bring up, and there's so many movies where like what they did with the score changed filmmaking too, right? Like, as they talk about how when you see the first Frankenstein movie, it has that weird kind of feeling because there's pretty much no score for the whole Frankenstein movie, right? Just the beginning and then the end credits. And that's what made those old movies feel like they took forever because there was no like music to build up that excitement, right? There's just a lot of like silence and awkwardness. Then you go from Frankenstein to Bride of Frankenstein, where they have all musical cues in there, and like what a different thing it is. And they brought up this really great point, how like the music itself gives you a look into the monster's mind, where there's no like dialogue or anything showing what he's feeling or what he's thinking, but the music itself makes you understand how he's feeling or what he's thinking.
yeah, I mean, Bride of Frankenstein is one of my favorite movies ever, and you talk about like pieces of music that are instantly recognizable. You don't see the Bride of Frankenstein until the last 90 seconds of the movie,
Right,
but her introduction with, and they bring it up, it's almost like the music you'd hear at a wedding. The movie's called
right,
Bride of Frankenstein, and it's like
right.
these like beautiful bells ringing, like doves flying in the air type music.
Yeah,
And then it changes when the monster shows up and when she reacts to the monster, and it's just such a great final 2 minutes of the movie.
yeah,
uh it's amazing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, really great fucking episode. Just really, I mean, it's just made for guys like us. I was gonna say that they didn't include the Exorcist, like I said before, and I was kind of stunned by that. But then everything else is really interesting. Even like just talking about Psycho and how the fact that there wasn't going to be music in that scene when she was killed in the shower, and like how like the music in that is like the violence of her being killed.
Yeah.
You know, really, really great episode. We seem to kind of be focusing on this scores one versus the secret gems one, but like I was gonna say that with the secret gems one, I wanted to ask you out of these movies because I wrote most of the movies down that they showed, like which ones you'd seen. So they actually show like Freeway at one point. You know that movie with
i
go ahead.
I saw Freeway in a class in high school.
What?
I took a class in it was like I was in a research program, and I was doing a social science class, and we were doing a unit on like psychopaths, sociopaths, serial killers, and my teacher just showed Freeway, which is apparently what you could do in the late 90s when no kid had a cell phone.
Right.
Um, a movie that they bring up that is one of my all-time favorite movies, that it's on the list of movies that whenever somebody says, "Hey, what's a movie that not a lot of people have seen that you should go and see?" My first answer is always Dark City. Uh, in my
Nice.
top five on that list is Neon Demon.
Oh
Um,
yes, 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 yes.
Nicholas Winding Refn
Yeah.
is, I mean, he's a horror director who has referred to himself as a pornographer. That movie is absolutely insane.
Yep.
Features one of my favorite performances ever by Jenna Malone. She's the like head supporting actress in the movie. Like Keanu Reeves is in it in like a very small role. Elle Fanning, I think, is
Right.
the
Right.
Fanning
Elf.
in there.
Right.
Um, Such a great movie. House of the Devil by Ty West. We've covered Ty West a lot. Um, I'm looking. Oh, Troll Hunter,
Yeah, I didn't see that
fucking
one.
great movie, especially if you like found footage. It's one of the best found footage movies. It's done by Overdahl, Alexander. No, I, I think it's Alexander Overdahl or Andre Overdahl.
Okay.
He directed Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark,
Oh,
and
cool.
The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Wow. Okay, this
yeah,
guy's horror chops.
really good horror filmmaker. And
Yeah.
then I will recommend. I saw this at Alamo on like a weird Wednesday show, Santa Sangre.
I knew you were gonna talk about that. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was an all-timer of insanity, perversion. Like
Yeah.
you don't really feel you're watching a horror movie, but it's scary and beautiful and colorful. It's such a wild movie. And I will recommend, especially if you skipped over
Black
uh
Coat's daughter.
the spoiler, Black Coat's Daughter,
I
especially if
did.
you're into Oz Perkins.
Mm-hmm.
Uh I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House was slow. That was his first movie, I think. It's still
Okay.
worth a watch. It's a pretty cool little movie, but it's very slow. Black Coat's Daughter is excellent. Um, and if you loved Long Legs, I think you'll appreciate it.
Nice, nice. Well, another one that they brought up was Ganja and Hess, and I was like, that
Yes.
looks familiar. I was like, did they show that during Horror Noir? You know?
That was a big part of the original documentary, Horror Noir. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
actually saw that years ago, right after Horror Noir came out. That was like
Oh,
one of the
cool.
first movies I went and watched. It's wild. It's like very it's an experimental movie. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like you're watching a horror movie. It's just very I recommend it, but I don't know if it's for all tastes because it
sure,
feels very avant-garde. It feels very experimental. But it's obvious that it's, making points about, with doing stuff with vampire lore, but doing it for social reasons, make social commentary. And it's one of the, I think it's one of the only two movies of Dwayne Jones from
okay.
Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, wow. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
He's only in
But
two
yeah, I
movies.
did
That's
see
crazy.
that a couple years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you kind of like ran through most of the movies that they said on there, and I'm looking at the list. You already mentioned Rare Exports. I was gonna say you must have seen the Untamed, right?
No.
No. See, to me, it looks like
Oh,
like
yes, I did. And it was really awkward that that scene was on while I was in the living room with Charlotte and my and Athena.
oh
Yes, it was.
yes,
Yeah, I was like, "What the hell is this?" And then I was
yeah,
like, oh, "Tentacle sex." I remember this movie.
yes, yes,
Um,
yes,
which, if you've never seen The Untamed, we covered Possession.
right.
Possession is like if you want to see, Possession is really a hidden gem for a lot of people because it came out in 1980, and, and I mean I might have mentioned this last time. I think Possession really deserves a ton of attention, especially after 2024, because I felt like the first Omen had a scene that reminded me so much of Possession.
Yep.
Nosferatu has many scenes in the movie that feel that Robert Eggers was almost, he was like, all right, I'm going to take from Nosferatu 1922, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Possession, and we got, Long Dong Nosferatu.
Yes, yes. Thank God.
By the
Yes.
way, my team name at Horror Trivia Tuesday night
Yeah.
was Baba Booey Nosferatu's penis.
Nice, nice. Oh man, you got some creative names over there, man. Did you win?
So Tuesday night, my team came in third place. That was that final exam. We came in third by 1 point from second, 1 point from 2 points from first place. Always incredibly difficult. Like like finishing top three is like you feel
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Wednesday night, I went to Lucky 13, awesome metal bar in Brooklyn,
Nice.
and my team came in first place.
Oh, congratulations, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
So we had a
yeah.
good week.
It's funny, because and this could kind of wrap everything up. Is that like with the hidden gems discussion? It's interesting to consider what you would say a hidden gem is. Watching a show on Shudder, obviously you're a huge horror fan, and so there is like what would be a hidden gem for a huge horror fan versus like a hidden gem for anybody, right? And there are people who like if you mention like It Follows or The Babadook, people might consider those hidden gems because they're so like kind of removed from the horror scene, like they're not like into it like we are. Whereas like them saying Ghost Watch was a hidden gem, I was that's a hidden gem. I was like, I feel like everyone kind of knows about Ghostwatch and like talks about it on social media, But like you mentioned before, like Possession, you were like, that could be a hidden gem. But I saw you kind of reluctantly say that because it's like kind of
I
feels like everybody knows about it. Go ahead.
I feel like, especially nowadays,
Yeah.
where movies are so readily available on a variety of streaming services,
Yeah.
I think that hidden gems going forward are going to be kind of the lost movies, the movies that never made the cut from VHS to DVD and therefore are kind of like lost in the video store days.
Right.
Like again, I'll bring up David Weiner's In Search of Darkness 3, where he goes into a lot of those like deep cuts. And this is where we have so many of these great like boutique label physical media stores. Like I think instantly of like, Vinegar Syndrome, like a movie that you may have seen in passing at the video store. Like, oh, I remember that box. Like, look, I always bring up Unmasked Part 25, right? Unmasked Part 25 was a movie that I rented. I never rented. I just remember the box at the video store. And then I went over 20 to 30 years without ever thinking about it again. And then I saw it on Tubi and I went, oh shit, it's that movie from the video store. And
Right.
I watched it and I went, oh my God, I love this movie. And then Vinegar Syndrome put out a fucking Blu ray of it. And like found the director to do director's commentary. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, when I think of a hidden gem now,
Yeah.
I think about a movie, especially in horror. I think about a movie that, like, maybe I remember the box art for at the video store, but I never saw or I haven't seen in 25 years. That if I bring up in at work, like if I'm at work and I'm like, oh yeah, I saw this cool horror movie, Get Out, everybody's like, oh yeah, yeah, okay. Or if I say, oh yeah, if somebody asks me, oh Danny, you're a horror fan, what's your favorite horror movie? And I'd say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, everybody knows what that is.
Right.
But if I said, Possession, or Ghost Watch, my department office at work is gonna go, huh?
Right.
And and so, yes, some of those movies are still streaming or are available on streaming services. And, thank God we have like a platform like Tubi, which is free and plays these kind of like hard to find old movies. And we have like the Vinegar Syndrome labels and the Shout Factories and, these labels that put out these movies for consumption. But yeah, I think that a lot of times you get movies that like for me, I've been yelling rare exports for I feel like seven since we started this show.
Yeah.
Since the first time we decided to do a holiday horror episode, and I was like, this crazy Scandinavian movie about Santa Claus who's really Krampus and he's stuck in the iceberg.
Yeah.
And here we are, it's now 5 years 5 years later, and it comes up as a hidden gem. That was covered on Joe Bob's Last
That's right.
Drive-In.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, but I mean, like that's the thing. Like you have like Elvira back in the day with like Movie Macabre. You have Joe Bob's Last Drive-In. You have these like horror hosts that covered these super low budget movies. So, like, I I don't know if there is a good definition for hidden gem. I guess it's like whatever movie that you like that you're pretty sure your friends haven't seen and you want to talk to them about. Like
Yes.
Dark City was a big budget science fiction movie with an A-list cast.
Right.
Jennifer Connelly, Kiefer Sutherland, Rufus Sewell, William
William
Hurt.
Hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got an A-level cast, amazing special effects. It probably cost millions of dollars to make, and because it just had the misfortune of coming out around the same time as The Matrix, nobody ever talks about it. And
Right.
so, a hidden gem could be a big budget science fiction movie that just didn't find its audience at that time, or a big budget action movie. We see this all the time where like people try to reclaim movies from the past.
Yep.
Like, oh, everybody shit on this movie back then, but now look at it. It's a classic. And sometimes that's true. And sometimes it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. And it's funny because like Ghostwatch, I wouldn't consider a hidden gem at this point, but then you of all people haven't seen it. And I have this feeling, you said like you want to talk about these. I have this feeling I'm gonna get a message within this week of like, oh, we should cover this. We should talk about this, But yeah, I mean we could keep going about these two episodes. They were really great, especially the scores one. This show is just great for guys like us, and it's good to just keep talking about it. We're kind of like we're the two talking heads that like they forgot to add on to their discussions. But I was gonna say, Danny, we have to go do our David Lynch recording next. Did you have anything else you want to say about these two episodes?
no, I think we're good. I think if Horror's Greatest is doing what they did in season 1, I think that this coming Tuesday's episode is the final one of the season. Did you what I didn't see the very end of this episode. So what is the next week's? Oh boy,
Uh,
you're smiling.
oh, dude, I think I actually felt something move down there. No, I was gonna say, space horror.
Space?
Space horror.
I
That's
heard
right.
a rumor that in space no one could hear you scream. Is that true?
Yes, but they can hear you orgasm. So
Oh,
anyway,
I can't wait. Listen, one of my all-time favorite horror movies that takes place in space. I can't wait till next week for Leprechaun 4. Yeah, I'll be here. No, I'm
yeah,
like, I mean, literally, like, there's so many to cover, but I know they're going to cover. I can imagine they're going to cover Life Force, Event Horizon, Alien, like all the Alien movies. Um, yeah, let's
yeah,
let's
yeah. That's
let's
one of the
freaking
best
go.
things about this show is that they do like a little trailer at the very end, like coming up next time. And they showed like Event Horizon right away, and I was like, oh, I think I know what this is gonna be. And they showed like Sunshine, they showed 2001, they showed all. I mean, of course, they showed Alien like all over
That
the place.
I'm so glad you just said Sunshine because
Yeah.
that's another fucking hidden gem. I feel like
Hmm.
you talk about an A-list cast. Holy shit! It's got
Yeah.
Chris Evans before he became Captain America.
Right.
It's got
Rose
best
Byrne.
Rose Byrne, best actor winner from last year, Cillian
Yeah.
Murphy,
Yeah.
and then and it's by an Oscar-winning director,
Yeah.
it who everybody loves all of his movies, but nobody ever talks about Sunshine, and it's written by Alex Garland, and everybody shits on the ending, and I fucking love the ending of Sunshine, and now I want to rewatch Sunshine.
Okay. Well, you can as soon as we finish our David Lynch recording, which we're doing
Yes.
next. So, do you want to
Yeah.
just plug what's coming up on the channel? That way, if people just see this
We
one,
Yeah, we have a busy month coming up.
yeah,
We so on obviously as Pete alluded to, David Lynch passed away last week. One of Pete's favorite filmmakers of all time, a filmmaker that on New Year's Day I posted on social media that I wanted to spend this year, 2025, kind of catching up on filmmakers that I have kind of missed out on. And I named David Lynch as one of them. Monday night, I went to IFC Center and I saw Mulholland Drive for the first time. It was a wonderful night. They introduced the film. They paid tribute to David Lynch on the sign outside of IFC, and then Justin Theroux, Naomi Watts, and Scott Coffey from the film all were there. They gave a really amazing kind of just quick 6-7 minute intro to the movie, talking about what David Lynch meant to them. I recorded that. I put it up on the channel. I've gotten great feedback. Like there like almost 60-70 comments, all, many saying thank you for recording that. I do that all the time at IFC. If there's, it was just, I wasn't ready for it. All of a sudden they just came out, and so I saw Mulholland Drive for the first time. Yes, for the first time. And Pete was very excited. So we are going to be covering some of David Lynch's more horror-based films. And we're going to start with Mulholland Drive, of course. And then we still owe you a top 10 list from 2024, which we're going to get to in probably 2 weeks' time.
Yes.
And then with the Oscars coming up, major events at the Oscars for horror movies. Nosferatu got 4 nominations, mostly in the technical categories: cinematography, sound design. Well, those technical categories, which I'm glad, because that was my favorite part of Nosferatu. But the big winner for horror was The Substance.
Yeah.
5 nominations: Best Picture, Coralie Farja for Best Screenplay and Director, Demi fucking Moore for Best Actress, and Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Margaret Qualley was ripped off, but I'll be okay. So a big talking point has been The Substance is only the 7th horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture. So Pete and I are going to talk about those previous 6 movies, 6 horror movies, and we'll also talk about some of the other horror people that have been nominated and who have actually won, like Kathy Bates for Misery, Frederick March, the original horror Oscar winner for 1931s, I want to say.
Okay.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But a little hint to some of the horror movies nominated for Best Picture. I'll just do that.
Nice.
So we have a lot of stuff coming up on the channel. Yeah.
Yes.
If you like David Lynch, if you like the Oscars, if you want a top 10 list from 2024, stay tuned. Subscribe, like our videos.
There you go. Danny's got it right there. All right, we're gonna go record a David Lynch one, guys. We will talk to you guys next week.